The bitter December wind howled across the Montana plains like a living thing bent on destruction, and Wade Keller knew he had maybe 20 minutes before the storm would make travel impossible. But something dark against the white snow caught his eye and made him turn his horse toward what looked like a crumpled heap of fabric. As he drew closer, his heart seized in his chest because it was not fabric at all but a woman, her lips blue and her body trembling violently, barely conscious in the mounting drifts. He did not hesitate, swinging down from his horse and gathering her into his arms, feeling how light she was, how close to death. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and glassy, but she seemed to see him, seemed to understand that salvation had arrived in the form of a stranger on horseback. Wade wrapped her in his heavy coat and lifted her onto his mare, climbing up behind her and holding her against his chest as he urged the animal toward his cabin 3 miles west. The ride felt eternal. Snow lashed at them from every direction, and Wade kept one arm locked around the woman while the other guided his horse through increasingly treacherous terrain. He could feel her shivering against him, her body trying desperately to generate warmth it did not have. He talked to her even though she could not respond, his voice steady and calm, telling her to hold on, telling her she would be all right, telling her his name and that he would not let her die out here in this God-forsaken wilderness. The cabin appeared through the white curtain of snow like a miracle, small and sturdy, smoke still rising from the chimney where he had banked the fire before heading out to check his trap lines that morning. Wade dismounted and pulled the woman down into his arms, kicking open the cabin door and rushing inside. The warmth hit them immediately, the fire still glowing in the hearth. He laid her on his bed, the only bed in the single-room cabin, and began working quickly to remove her wet clothes. Her dress was soaked through, frozen in places, and her boots were little more than worn leather that had provided no protection against the elements. He averted his eyes as much as possible while removing the wet garments, replacing them with his own dry wool shirt and thick socks, then piling every blanket he owned on top of her. Her skin was like ice, her fingertips white with frostbite, and Wade knew he needed to warm her slowly or risk doing more harm than good. He built up the fire until it roared in the hearth, then heated water and filled his canteen, placing it under the blankets near her feet. He rubbed her hands gently, trying to restore circulation, and watched her face for signs of consciousness. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with dark hair that spread across his pillow in wet tangles. Even half frozen and on the edge of death, he could see she was beautiful, but more than that, he could see she was refined, educated, not the type of woman who should have been wandering alone in a Montana blizzard. Hours passed. Wade kept vigil beside the bed, monitoring her breathing, adding wood to the fire, preparing hot broth for when she woke. If she woke, he tried not to think about the alternative, tried not to imagine burying her in the spring when the ground thawed because he had found her too late. The storm raged outside, wind shrieking around the cabin walls, snow piling against the door. They were trapped here together, this stranger and him, and all Wade could do was wait and hope. It was near midnight when her eyes finally opened. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, disoriented, then turned her head slowly and found Wade sitting in his chair beside the bed, his elbows on his knees, watching her with concerned brown eyes. "You are safe," he said quietly. "You are in my cabin. I found you in the snow." She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry and she coughed. Wade quickly poured water from a pitcher and helped her sit up enough to drink. She took small sips, wincing as if even that simple act caused pain. When she finished, she lay back down and looked at him again, really looked at him, taking in his weathered face, his dark hair, the genuine concern in his expression. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Those 2 words carried the weight of a life saved, a debt acknowledged, a connection formed. Wade nodded, feeling something shift in his chest, some door opening that had been closed for a very long time. "What is your name?" he asked. "Thea," she said. "Thea Jensen. Wade Keller." "You gave me quite a scare, Miss Jensen." "I got separated from the coach," she said, her words coming slowly, painfully. "We hit something, a rock or a hole in the road. The driver lost control. I was thrown clear, but when I got up, the coach was gone. I tried to find it, but the snow, everything looked the same. I just kept walking." "The coach left you." Wade's voice hardened. "I do not think they knew. It happened so fast. One moment I was inside, the next I was in the snow, and the coach was disappearing into the storm. I called out, but the wind, it was too loud." Wade felt anger rise in him at the thought of a coach driver not checking his passengers, but he pushed it down. What mattered now was that Thea was here, alive, and would recover. "You were lucky I was out checking my lines," he said. "Another hour and I would not have found you until spring." Thea's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was going to die. I kept walking because I thought if I stopped, if I let myself rest, I would not get up again. But then I could not feel my feet anymore, and everything was so cold, and I just wanted to sleep." "You are safe now," Wade said again. "The storm should pass in a day or two, then we will figure out how to get you where you were going." "I was going to Hawthorne," Thea said. "To teach at the school there. I was supposed to arrive yesterday." Wade nodded. "Hawthorne was the nearest town, about 15 miles south. They will be worried about you, but there is nothing we can do until this storm clears. You need to rest, get your strength back." Thea's eyes were already growing heavy. The exhaustion of her ordeal, combined with the warmth and safety of the cabin, pulled her back toward sleep. Wade watched as her breathing deepened and evened out, then stood and moved to the window. Snow pressed against the glass, a solid wall of white. They would be here for at least 2 more days, possibly 3. He had enough food for both of them, enough wood to keep the fire going. What he did not have was a spare bed, but that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, he would sleep in his chair and be grateful that Thea Jensen was alive to occupy his bed. The next morning arrived with no change in the weather. Wade woke stiff and sore from sleeping upright, his neck protesting as he rolled his shoulders and stood. Thea was still asleep, her color much better than it had been the night before. He built up the fire, started coffee, and began preparing breakfast. The smell of bacon frying eventually roused Thea, and she sat up slowly, pulling the blankets around herself. "How are you feeling?" Wade asked without turning from the stove. "Sore," Thea admitted, "and hungry." "That is a good sign. Means your body is recovering." He brought her a plate with bacon, eggs, and bread along with a cup of coffee. Thea accepted it gratefully, realizing as the food touched her lips just how ravenous she was. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Thea spoke. "I am in your bed. Where did you sleep?" "The chair." "That is not right. You saved my life, and now you cannot even sleep in your own bed." Wade shrugged. "I have slept in worse places. You need it more than I do right now." Thea looked around the cabin properly for the first time. It was small but well kept, everything in its place. A table and 2 chairs, the bed, a wood stove, shelves lined with supplies and books. Books surprised her. Not many men living alone in the wilderness kept books. "You read?" she asked, gesturing to the shelf. "When I can. Gets lonely out here sometimes. Books help." "What do you do, Mr. Keller?" "You mentioned trap lines." "I trap, hunt, do some work for the ranches when they need extra hands. I like the solitude mostly. Came out here after the war, needed space to think." "Which side?" Thea asked, then immediately looked apologetic. I am sorry, that is too personal a question. Union, Wade said. Lost a lot of friends. Came back and found I did not fit in towns anymore. Too much noise, too many people. So I came here, built this cabin, and made a life that made sense to me. Thea nodded, understanding in her eyes. My father fought for the Union too. He came back different, quieter. He died 2 years ago. Illness took him. I am sorry. Thank you. It is part of why I became a teacher. He valued education above almost everything else, said it was the only way forward after so much destruction. Wade poured himself more coffee and sat at the table. Where are you from, Miss Jensen? Boston. But please call me Thea. You saved my life. I think we can dispense with formalities. Only if you call me Wade. She smiled, the first real smile since she had woken, and Wade felt his chest tighten again. She was beautiful when she smiled, her whole face transforming, eyes lighting up. So you came all the way from Boston to teach in Montana? He asked. The school board advertised for teachers back east. They are desperate for educated women willing to come west. The pay is modest, but they provide housing, and it seemed like an adventure. My mother was horrified, of course, but I wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered. Teaching matters, Wade said. Especially out here where schools are scarce. They talked through the morning as the storm continued to rage outside. Wade learned that Thea had taught for 2 years in Boston before applying for the position in Hawthorne, that she loved literature and history, that she played piano though she did not expect to find one in Montana. Thea learned that Wade was 29, that he had been living in his cabin for 3 years, that he had a sister back in Ohio. He wrote to occasionally, but otherwise kept no ties to his old life. By afternoon, Thea was strong enough to stand and move around the cabin. Her fingers and toes ached as circulation fully returned, but there appeared to be no permanent damage from the frostbite. Wade gave her a pair of his smaller trousers and suspenders so she could move about more freely, and while they were far too large on her, she belted them and laughed at how ridiculous she must look. I have seen worse, Wade said, grinning. At least you are warm. That evening they played cards by the firelight. Wade taught Thea a game his army unit used to play, and she caught on quickly, her competitive nature emerging as she started winning hands. The cabin felt different with her in it, Wade realized. Less empty, less lonely. He had grown accustomed to silence, to his own company, but having Thea here, hearing her laugh, watching her face as she concentrated on her cards, it reminded him of what he had been missing. The second day brought more of the same weather. Snow continued falling, though the wind had died down some. Wade checked his supplies and calculated they had enough food for a week if necessary, though he hoped it would not come to that. Thea's dress had dried by the fire, and she examined it with dismay, finding tears and stains that would be difficult to repair. I packed 3 more dresses in my trunk, she said sadly. But that is wherever you, the coach, ended up. We will find it, Wade assured her. Once the storm clears, I will ride out and look. The coach cannot have gotten far in this weather. They probably holed up in Hawthorne or one of the ranches along the way. If they even realized I was missing. Thea's voice was bitter. They realized, and if they did not, they will answer for it. The fierceness in Wade's voice surprised both of them. He was not normally one to make threats or promises, but the thought of Thea being abandoned, left to die in the snow, stirred something protective in him that he had not felt in years. That night, Thea insisted Wade take the bed while she slept in the chair. They argued about it for several minutes before reaching a compromise. The bed was large enough for 2 people if they stayed to their own sides. Both were adults. Both understood the boundaries. It was practical, nothing more. Except lying there in the darkness, Wade found it nearly impossible to sleep. He could hear Thea breathing beside him, could feel the warmth radiating from her body even though they maintained a careful distance between them. He stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time he had been this aware of another person's presence, this attuned to every small movement and sound. "Wade." Thea's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yes, thank you again. For everything. For saving me, for taking care of me, for sharing your home. I know I have disrupted your life. You have not disrupted anything important. Still, I am grateful." There was a long pause, then Thea spoke again. "Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you lonely out here?" Wade considered the question. "I was not until you asked." He heard her shift, turning toward him though he could barely make out her silhouette in the dim light from the banked fire. "I think I would be lonely," she said. "All this space, all this silence. I grew up in a house full of noise and people. Even after my father died, there was my mother, my two sisters, the neighbors. Someone was always around. The idea of living alone, seeing no one for days at a time, it sounds terrifying. You get used to it, and it is not always alone. I go into town every few weeks for supplies, talk to folks then. The ranchers come by sometimes. It is enough." "Is it?" The question hung in the air between them. Wade did not answer because he was no longer sure what the truth was. 2 days ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. Now, with Thea lying beside him, her presence filling the cabin with something he could not quite name, he was not so certain. The third day dawned clear and bright, the storm finally exhausted. Wade woke before Thea and slipped outside to assess the damage. Snow had drifted against the cabin walls up to the windows in places, and his horse's shelter was nearly buried, but the mare was safe and well. The world was transformed into a landscape of white, beautiful and deadly, the sun glinting off the snow with painful brightness. He dug out the door and the path to the shelter, then fed and watered his horse. When he came back inside, Thea was up and dressed, heating water for coffee. "It stopped," she said, relief evident in her voice. "It did. But the snow is deep. It will take time to make it to Hawthorne. Probably 2 days on horseback, going slow." Thea nodded, something like disappointment crossing her face before she schooled her expression into neutrality. "Of course. The sooner I get there, the sooner I can begin my work. I will ride out today and see if I can find any sign of the coach or your trunk. Tomorrow we will head to town. You do not have to escort me. I have already imposed enough." "Thea." Wade waited until she looked at him. "I am not leaving you to find your own way. I will see you safely to Hawthorne." The ride out was slow going, the snow making travel difficult even for Wade's sure-footed mare. He left Thea in the cabin with strict instructions to keep the fire going and stay warm. It took him 4 hours to find what he was looking for. The coach had made it further than he expected, almost to the turnoff for the Double R Ranch, before getting stuck in a snowdrift. It was abandoned now, the driver and any other passengers having presumably walked the rest of the way to either the ranch or Hawthorne. Wade searched the coach and found Thea's trunk, along with 2 other pieces of luggage that must have belonged to other passengers. He secured Thea's trunk to his saddle and started back, arriving at the cabin as the sun began to set. Thea cried when she saw her trunk, throwing her arms around Wade's neck in spontaneous joy. He stood frozen for a moment, surprised by the contact, then awkwardly patted her back. She smelled like wood smoke and soap, and having her pressed against him sent warmth flooding through his body that had nothing to do with temperature. "Thank you," she said, pulling back, her eyes shining. "I thought I had lost everything." That evening, Thea changed into one of her proper dresses, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She brushed and braided her hair, transforming from the girl in oversized trousers back into a refined lady. Wade found himself missing the girl in his clothes, the one who had laughed at cards and argued about sleeping arrangements. This version of Thea reminded him that she did not belong in his cabin, that she had a life waiting for her in Hawthorne, that these few days together were just a brief intersection of two very different paths. They ate dinner quietly, both aware that tomorrow would change everything. Wade would take Thea to town, deliver her to whoever was responsible for the new teacher, and ride back to his solitary cabin. Life would return to normal. The thought sat heavy in his chest. "What will you do when we get to Hawthorne?" Wade asked. "Meet with the school board, see the house they have arranged for me, prepare for classes to begin after the new year, try to replace the supplies I lost when I was separated from the coach." Thea paused. "Resume the life I planned. It will be a good life. Teaching is important work." "Yes." Thea looked at him across the table. "What will you do? Come back here, check my trap lines, probably head into town in a few weeks for supplies." "Will you visit? When you come to town?" The question surprised him. "Would you want me to?" "Of course I would. You saved my life, Wade." "That creates a bond, and I—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I have enjoyed these days. Despite the circumstances, despite the fact that I nearly died, these have been some of the most peaceful, genuine days I can remember. You have been kind and respectful and interesting to talk to. I would very much like to remain friends." Friends. The word felt both right and entirely insufficient. Wade nodded. "I would like that too." They stayed up late that night, neither wanting to acknowledge that it was their last evening together. Thea read aloud from one of Wade's books, her voice bringing the words to life in a way his silent reading never achieved. Wade whittled a piece of wood, his hands working automatically while he listened. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, and they lay down in the bed that had become their shared space, careful to maintain their respectful distance. "Wade," Thea's voice came through the darkness. "Yes." "I am glad you found me. Not just because you saved my life, though I am grateful for that, but because I met you, because I got to know you. That matters to me." Wade felt his throat tighten. "It matters to me too." The ride to Hawthorne took most of the following day. Wade's mare carried them both, Thea sitting in front of Wade with his arms around her, keeping her steady. Her trunk was secured behind the saddle. The landscape was beautiful in its winter severity, endless white broken by dark pines and bare aspens. They saw a deer, a fox, an eagle circling overhead. Thea pointed out things that caught her eye, and Wade explained what he knew about the land, the animals, the way the seasons changed this far north. As Hawthorne came into view, small and rough but larger than Wade's isolated cabin, Thea fell silent. Wade felt her stiffen in his arms, felt her take a deep breath as if preparing herself for what came next. The town was buzzing with activity when they rode in. People stopped and stared as Wade's horse made its way down the main street, a man and a woman riding together, clearly having traveled some distance. Wade headed for the general store, knowing that Silas Murphy, who owned it, was also the head of the school board. Silas came rushing out before Wade could even dismount, his face a mixture of relief and concern. "Miss Jensen, we have been worried sick about you. When the coach arrived without you, we feared the worst. We sent men out searching, but the storm, it was impossible. Where have you been?" Wade helped Thea down from the horse before responding. "She was thrown from the coach during the storm. I found her about 3 miles from my cabin, nearly frozen. I took her there to recover. We came as soon as it was safe to travel." A crowd was gathering now, people pressing close with questions and exclamations. Thea looked overwhelmed, and Wade instinctively moved closer to her, providing a physical barrier between her and the curious townspeople. "Someone fetch Doc Harrison," Silas called out. "Miss Jensen needs to be examined, make sure she is all right." "I am fine," Thea protested. "Mr. Keller took excellent care of me. Still, better to be certain. Come inside, you must be exhausted and hungry." "When did you last eat?" "This morning," Thea said. "Really, I am fine." But Silas was already ushering her toward the store, and the crowd followed, leaving Wade standing by his horse. He should leave, he knew. His job was done. Thea was safe, delivered to the town that would be her new home. But he found himself unable to mount his horse and ride away. A young woman detached herself from the crowd and approached him. She was perhaps 18, with blonde hair and a friendly smile. "That was a brave thing you did, rescuing Miss Jensen like that. I am Alice Murphy, Silas's daughter. You must be Wade Keller." "I am. We have heard about you. You live up in the high country, keep to yourself mostly. My father says you are a good man, honest." Wade nodded, not sure what response was expected. "You should come inside," Alice said. "I am sure Miss Jensen will want to thank you properly, and you should eat something before riding back. It is a long way." She was right, though Wade's instinct was to simply leave. But the thought of departing without saying a proper goodbye to Thea felt wrong, so he followed Alice into the store. Inside, Thea was surrounded by people. Silas was introducing her to various townspeople, all eager to meet the new teacher. The doctor had arrived and was insisting on examining her despite her protests. Through it all, Thea kept glancing toward the door, and when she saw Wade, her face lit up with relief. She excused herself and made her way through the crowd to him. "You did not leave," she said, and he could hear the gratitude in her voice. "Wanted to make sure you were settled." "They are overwhelming," Thea said quietly. "Everyone means well, but it is a lot all at once. You will adjust. You are strong." "Am I?" Thea looked uncertain. 3 days ago I was lying in the snow thinking I would die. Now I am supposed to be a teacher, a pillar of this community, someone these people depend on. I do not feel strong." "You walked for hours in a blizzard when most people would have given up. You survived. That is strength." Thea smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Will you really visit when you come to town?" "I said I would. People say things. They do not always mean them." Wade reached out and took her hand, a bold gesture for him, especially with half the town watching. "I mean it." The doctor approached then, insisting that Thea needed rest and examination. Silas appeared at Wade's elbow, pressing money into his hand, a reward for saving the teacher's life. Wade tried to refuse, but Silas would not hear of it. "You did this town a great service," Silas said. "We would have been devastated to lose Miss Jensen before she even began her work here. Please, accept this with our gratitude." Wade pocketed the money, knowing it would be insulting to refuse further. He caught Thea's eye one more time, tried to convey everything he was feeling in that single look, then turned and walked out of the store. The ride back to his cabin felt longer than it had that morning. The horse knew the way, leaving Wade free to think, to replay the last 4 days in his mind. The image of Thea in the snow, Thea in his cabin, Thea lying beside him in the darkness, Thea's arms around his neck when he brought her trunk. He had told himself he did not need people, did not want the complications they brought. But Thea had complicated everything simply by existing, by coming into his life for those brief days, and showing him what he had been missing. The cabin felt empty when he returned. He built up the fire, heated leftovers for dinner, sat in his chair with a book and could not focus on the words. The bed seemed too large for just him now. The silence was oppressive rather than peaceful. Wade realized with uncomfortable clarity that he had been lying to himself for 3 years. He was not content in his solitude. He was hiding. The next 2 weeks passed slowly. Wade checked his trap lines, hunted, chopped wood, did all the tasks that filled his days. But his thoughts kept returning to Hawthorne, to a blue-eyed teacher who had whispered thank you and changed everything. It was 3 weeks after delivering Thea to town that Wade made his regular supply run. He told himself it had nothing to do with wanting to see her, that he would have gone to Hawthorne regardless. But he took extra care with his appearance that morning, trimming his beard, putting on his cleanest shirt. The town was busy when he arrived. School was in session, he knew, which meant Thea would be teaching. Still, he found himself riding past the schoolhouse, a small white building at the edge of town. Through the window he could see her, standing at the front of a room full of children, writing something on a blackboard. She looked confident in her element, and Wade felt both proud and wistful. He conducted his business at the general store, buying supplies and chatting with Silas about the weather and the upcoming Christmas holiday. He was loading his purchases onto his horse when he heard his name. Wade. He turned to find Thea hurrying down the street toward him, her coat unbuttoned, clearly having left in a rush. She reached him slightly out of breath, her face flushed from the cold. "Someone told me they saw you ride in. I was afraid you would leave before I could see you. Did not want to interrupt your teaching. School finished an hour ago. I was just preparing lessons for tomorrow." Thea smiled up at him. "It is so good to see you. How are you? How is the cabin? Have you been well?" "Fine. Everything is fine. You, busy?" "The students are wonderful, challenging but wonderful. The town has been welcoming. I have my own little house, nothing fancy but it is mine. I have been meeting people, learning names, trying to find my place here." They stood awkwardly for a moment, so much to say and no idea how to begin. "Would you like to come for dinner?" Thea asked suddenly. "I know you probably want to get back before dark, but I would love to cook for you, to repay some of your hospitality." Wade knew he should refuse. The smart thing would be to conduct his business and return to his cabin, to maintain the distance that would allow both of them to move forward with their separate lives. But he found himself nodding. "I would like that." Thea's house was indeed small, just 3 rooms, but she had made it warm and welcoming. Books lined a shelf, a quilt was draped over the sofa, curtains hung in the windows. She prepared a simple meal of stew and bread, while Wade sat at her table and watched, answering her questions about his last few weeks, asking about her students. "There is one boy, Timothy, who reminds me of my father," Thea said as she ladled stew into bowls. "He is so hungry to learn, asks 1,000 questions. But his family is poor, and I worry they will pull him out of school to work. I am trying to convince his parents that education is an investment." "You care about them already, the students. How can I not? They are why I came here. Each one of them deserves a chance to become something more than circumstances might dictate." They talked through dinner, the conversation flowing easily as it had in the cabin. Wade felt himself relaxing, the tension that had knotted his shoulders for weeks slowly easing. This was what he had missed, he realized. Not just Thea specifically, though he had missed her terribly, but connection. Someone to talk to share thoughts with, to simply be present with. After dinner, Wade helped Thea wash dishes, and she laughed at his careful handling of the plates. "You look terrified of breaking them. They are delicate. I am used to tin plates and wooden bowls." "They are just dishes, Wade. They can be replaced." But he was careful anyway, drying each piece and handing it to Thea to put away. Their hands brushed during the transfers, small moments of contact that sent electricity up Wade's arm. When the dishes were done, they sat in Thea's small living room, the conversation gradually slowing, a comfortable silence falling between them. Wade knew he should leave. It was already dark and he had a long ride ahead of him, but he could not seem to make himself stand, could not seem to say goodbye. "I missed you," Thea said quietly. These last few weeks, I kept thinking about our time in the cabin. About our conversations, our card games, the way you read while I prepared meals. I missed it. Wade's heart hammered in his chest. I missed you too. Did you? Thea turned to look at him fully. Or did you just miss having someone around? Both. Either, I do not know. Wade struggled to find words for feelings he barely understood. The cabin felt empty after you left. Silence I used to find peaceful just felt lonely. I kept expecting to hear your voice, your laugh. I found myself thinking about things I wanted to tell you, then remembering you were not there. Wade. Thea reached out and took his hand. What are we doing? I do not know. I came here to teach, to build a life, to be independent and useful, I know. And you have a life in the high country, a life you chose deliberately. I know that too. So why does being apart from you feel so wrong? Wade had no answer. He looked down at their joined hands, her small fingers intertwined with his larger, rougher ones, and felt certainty settle over him. Because in 4 days, you became more important to me than 3 years of solitude, he said. Because saving your life made me want to be part of it. Because everything I thought I knew about what I needed was wrong. Thea's eyes filled with tears. I feel it too. This pull toward you, this sense that I left something essential behind when I came to town. I tell myself it is gratitude, that I am confusing appreciation for what you did with something deeper. But it does not feel like gratitude. What does it feel like? Like coming home. Like finding something I did not know I was looking for. Wade reached up and cupped Thea's face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. I am not good at this, at feelings, at talking about them. I spent years learning to be alone, to not need anyone, but I need you. I do not know what to do with that. Neither do I, but we can figure it out together. When Wade kissed her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Her lips were soft and warm, and she leaned into him with a small sound of contentment. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. I should not have done that, Wade said, though he made no move to release her. Why not? Because you are the town's teacher. Because people will talk. Because I do not want to complicate your life. My life has been complicated since the moment you pulled me out of that snowstorm. Thea smiled. And I do not care if people talk. I care that you are here, that you feel what I feel. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper. Wade pulled Thea closer, felt her arms wrap around his neck, and let himself fall into the sensation. When they finally broke apart, both knew something fundamental had shifted between them. Wade stayed late that night, far later than he should have. They talked about possibilities, about what it might look like for them to build something together. Wade could not live in town, his nature would not allow it, but Thea did not want him to. She loved her teaching, but said she could imagine a life that included both her work and time in the high country with Wade. It would not be easy. It would require compromise and patience and dealing with gossip, but neither of them cared about the obstacles. They had found something rare and worth fighting for. When Wade finally rode out, it was near midnight. He looked back to see Thea standing in her doorway, lit from behind by lamplight, waving. He raised his hand in return, then urged his horse toward home, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Over the next few months, Wade made the trip to Hawthorne every week. Sometimes he stayed just a few hours, having dinner with Thea and helping with small repairs around her house. Other times he stayed overnight, sleeping on her sofa, careful to maintain propriety. The town noticed, of course. People talked. But Thea handled it with grace, acknowledging that yes, she and Wade were courting, and no, she did not appreciate speculation beyond that. The school board was less pleased. Silas Murphy, who had been so grateful to Wade for saving Thea's life, was now concerned about the relationship. "It is not proper," he told Thea during a meeting in late February. "You are a role model for the children. You cannot be seen keeping company with a man who lives alone in the wilderness, who has no proper employment." "Wade works very hard," Thea said, her voice calm but firm. "He traps and hunts and provides value to the community by selling his goods. The fact that he chooses to live independently does not make him improper. But you are unmarried, and he visits you regularly, sometimes staying late into the evening. We are courting, Mr. Murphy. Is that not the natural progression of adults who care for one another? Would you prefer I accept his attentions in secret? I would prefer you focus on your teaching and wait to pursue romantic entanglements until you are more established here." Thea stood, gathering her things. "With respect, Mr. Murphy, my personal life is my own concern as long as it does not interfere with my work. My students are progressing well. I have had no complaints about my teaching, and I conduct myself appropriately at all times. Who I choose to spend time with outside of school hours is not the school board's business." She left before Silas could respond, her hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. That evening, she told Wade about the conversation. "Maybe I should stop visiting so often," Wade said, though the words clearly pained him. "Absolutely not. I will not let narrow-minded busybodies dictate my life. If they have a problem with you, they have a problem with me. Thea, your job is important to me, but so are you. I will not choose between my work and my happiness." Wade pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "You are remarkable. You know that. I am stubborn. That too." The controversy died down as winter gave way to spring. The students continued to excel under Thea's teaching, and even her harshest critics had to admit she was doing an excellent job. Wade became a more common sight in town, and people grew accustomed to seeing him and Thea together. Some remained disapproving, but most came to accept that the teacher and the mountain man were a couple. In April, Wade invited Thea to spend a weekend at his cabin. She arranged for another teacher to cover her Monday classes and rode out with Wade on a Friday afternoon. Seeing his cabin again brought back memories of those first few days, of being weak and afraid, and discovering that salvation came in the form of a quiet man with kind eyes. "I was so frightened when I woke up here," Thea said, standing in the middle of the cabin and turning slowly. "Everything was unfamiliar. I did not know you, did not know where I was, but you made me feel safe." "You are always safe with me," Wade said. They spent the weekend hiking, fishing in a nearby stream, cooking together. Wade taught Thea to shoot, standing behind her and guiding her arms, his presence solid and reassuring. Thea read aloud in the evenings while Wade worked on tanning a hide. It was peaceful and right, a preview of what life together might look like. On Sunday evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Wade took Thea's hand. "Marry me," he said. Thea turned to stare at him. "What? Marry me? I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. I love you, Thea. I want to build a life with you." Tears spilled down Thea's cheeks. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Wade pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple ring, silver with a small turquoise stone. "It is not much," he said. "But turquoise is from this land, from the place where we found each other. It is perfect." Thea held out her hand and Wade slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it was meant to be there. They married in June, a small ceremony in Hawthorne's church with most of the town in attendance. Despite initial reservations, the community had come to embrace Wade and Thea's relationship, charmed by the love story that had emerged from that December snowstorm. Thea wore a simple white dress, and Wade wore his best suit, both looking happier than anyone had ever seen them. Silas Murphy performed his duties as school board president and gave Thea away, having been won over by Wade's dedication and obvious love for Thea. Alice Murphy stood as Thea's attendant, having become a close friend over the previous months. After the ceremony, there was a celebration in the town square with food and music and dancing. Wade, who had insisted he did not dance, found himself swaying with Thea under strings of lanterns as a fiddler played. They left as the sun was setting, riding double on Wade's mare toward the cabin that would be their home. The question of Thea's teaching had been resolved through compromise. She would continue working during the school year, staying in her small house in town during the week while teaching. Weekends and summers she would spend at the cabin with Wade. It was not perfect, but it allowed Thea to continue work she loved while building a marriage with the man she loved even more. Their first year of marriage was an adjustment. Wade had to learn to be less solitary, to share his space and his thoughts. Thea had to balance two worlds, her professional life in Hawthorne and her personal life in the high country. But they made it work through patience and communication and deep, abiding love. Summer was Thea's favorite time. She spent 3 months at the cabin, learning to hunt and fish, helping Wade with his work, tending a garden she planted near the cabin. In the evenings, they would sit outside and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about their days, their dreams, their future. "You ever regret it?" Wade asked one evening. "Giving up the life you planned? You could have stayed in Boston, taught there, married someone respectable." "Respectable is overrated," Thea said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And I did not give up anything important. I gained everything I needed. Even living in a tiny cabin with no neighbors, especially that. Though I do miss having people to talk to during the day sometimes. You can talk to me. You are often out checking trap lines. Then I will talk more when I am here." Thea laughed. "You talk plenty." "I just mean I am used to being around people. The solitude takes adjusting to." "But you are happy," she turned to look at him fully. "Happier than I have ever been. You saved my life, Wade, and then you gave me a life worth saving. How could I regret that?" In the fall of their second year of marriage, Thea discovered she was pregnant. The news brought both joy and fear. Pregnant women in remote areas faced risks, and Wade worried constantly. But Thea remained healthy and strong, continuing to teach through the winter until she became too uncomfortable to make the daily trip to the schoolhouse. She moved to the cabin in March, 2 months before the baby was due, and Wade barely left her side. He turned anxious and overprotective, fussing over her constantly until Thea had to remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time. Their son was born in May, a long, difficult labor that terrified Wade but that Thea handled with remarkable strength. They named him Thomas, after Thea's father, and he was healthy and loud and perfect. Wade held his son for the first time and cried, overwhelmed by love and responsibility and gratitude that both Thea and the baby had survived. Motherhood forced Thea to make a difficult decision. She could not continue teaching and care for an infant, not while splitting her time between 2 locations. With regret but no doubt, she resigned her position at the end of the school year. Her work had been meaningful, but her family was more important. "Are you sure?" Wade asked when she told him her decision. "I know how much teaching means to you. It did mean a lot, it still does, but Thomas means more. And you mean more. I can always teach again someday. Right now I want to be here with you both building our life." They settled into a new rhythm. Thea cared for Thomas and managed the household while Wade worked his trap lines and hunted. Money was never plentiful, But they had enough. More importantly, they had each other and their son, a family built from a chance encounter in a snowstorm. When Thomas was 2, Thea became pregnant again. This time, Wade was less anxious, trusting that Thea's strength would see her through. Their daughter, Ellen, was born in the fall, smaller than Thomas had been but just as healthy. With 2 children, the cabin felt cramped, and Wade began work on an addition, expanding their home to include another bedroom. The children grew, and life continued its steady progression. Thomas was serious and thoughtful like his father, while Ellen was adventurous and talkative like her mother. Wade taught Thomas to hunt and fish, while Thea taught both children to read and write, creating lessons around the kitchen table. "You are still teaching," Wade observed one afternoon, watching Thea guide Ellen through a particularly difficult passage. "I suppose I am. Just a different classroom." "A better one," Thea smiled. "Different, not necessarily better, but it is mine, and that makes it special." They made occasional trips to Hawthorne. The town had grown over the years, adding new businesses and residents. Thea visited with old friends, caught up on news, let the children interact with others their age. But she was always happy to return to the cabin, to the life she had built with Wade. On their 10th anniversary, Wade took Thea back to the spot where he had found her. It was summer now, the landscape green and lush instead of buried in snow, but Thea recognized it immediately. "I was lying right there," she said, pointing. "I had fallen, could not get up. Everything was white and cold, and I knew I was dying. And then I found you. The best luck of my life disguised as the worst moment, for both of us." Wade pulled Thea close. 10 years ago, I thought I knew what I wanted. Solitude, independence, freedom from connection. I was so wrong. You were protecting yourself, maybe. But then you came along and broke through all my defenses. You made me want more, made me believe I deserved more. "We saved each other," Thea said. "You pulled me from the snow, and I pulled you back to life." They stood together in that spot, remembering and grateful, before riding back to the cabin where their children waited. As years passed, Thomas and Ellen grew into capable young people. Thomas was quiet and steady, content with the rhythms of mountain life. Ellen was more restless, curious about the world beyond their isolated home. When she was 16, she announced her intention to attend teachers' college back east, to follow in her mother's footsteps. "I want to teach," Ellen said. "Not just Thomas and me, but lots of children. I want to help them the way you helped your students, Mama." Thea felt pride and sadness in equal measure. Her daughter leaving would create a hole in their family, but she also understood the need to pursue one's calling. "Then you should go," Thea said. "Your father and I will help however we can." Ellen left in the fall, traveling east with letters of introduction from Thea and money Wade had been saving for years. The cabin felt empty without her energy, but letters arrived regularly, full of stories about her classes and new experiences. She was thriving, just as Thea had known she would. Thomas, meanwhile, showed no interest in leaving. He helped Wade with the trap lines, learned to track and hunt, and fell in love with a girl from Hawthorne whose family owned a ranch. They married when Thomas was 22, building a small cabin near Wade and Thea's, creating a family compound of sorts. Wade and Thea became grandparents when Thomas and his wife Sarah had a daughter. Holding his granddaughter, Wade marveled at how much his life had changed from that solitary existence he had led before Thea. "Did you ever imagine this?" Thea asked, watching Wade rock the baby. "That day you found me in the snow, did you think it would lead to all this?" "I did not let myself imagine anything beyond getting you warm and alive. But I knew something had changed the moment I saw you. Some instinct told me you were going to matter. Instinct or hope, both. They settled into the rhythms of older age gracefully." Wade's hands grew stiff with arthritis, making detailed work harder, but he could still hunt and trap. Thea's eyes weakened, requiring glasses for reading, but she still taught her grandchildren their letters. Together, they watched seasons change, children grow, life continue its endless cycle. Ellen returned after finishing her education, taking a teaching position in Hawthorne. She visited often, bringing stories of her students and her growing reputation as an excellent educator. She never married, content with her work and her independence, and Thea recognized her younger self in her daughter's choices. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the cabin for a celebration. Thomas and Sarah brought their 3 children. Ellen came from town with gifts and laughter. Friends and neighbors made the journey to join them. The cabin that had once housed only one lonely man now overflowed with life and love. During the celebration, Silas Murphy, now elderly but still spry, pulled Wade aside. "I owe you an apology," Silas said. "When you and Thea started courting, I was opposed. Thought you were not good enough for our teacher, that the relationship was improper. I was wrong. You gave her a good life, a happy life. I can see that clearly now." "She gave me the same," Wade said. "We gave each other what we both needed. That is what the best marriages are. I am glad I was wrong about you, Wade Keller." As the sun set on that anniversary celebration, Wade and Thea slipped away from the crowd to sit in their favorite spot overlooking the valley. The mountains stretched before them, eternal and unchanging, a fitting backdrop for reflecting on a quarter-century together. "You remember what you said to me?" Wade asked. "That first time you woke up in my cabin, thank you." I whispered, "Thank you." "And you have been thanking me ever since by showing me how to live again." Thea took his hand, her fingers finding the familiar pattern of his. "I love you, Wade. Every day for 25 years I have loved you more than the day before. That is mathematically impossible at some point." She laughed. "Maybe, but it feels true anyway." They sat until stars emerged in the darkening sky, until the sounds of celebration from the cabin faded and their guests began preparing to leave or bed down for the night. Finally, they stood, joints protesting, and walked back hand in hand. The years continued their steady march. Wade and Thea grew older but remained active, still tending their home, still enjoying each other's company. They dealt with the losses that come with age, friends passing, their own health occasionally faltering. But they faced it together, each caring for the other during difficult times. When Wade was 73, he fell while checking a trap line in winter, breaking his leg badly. Thomas found him and brought him home, where Thea nursed him through the painful recovery. For months, Wade was immobile, frustrated by his body's betrayal. But Thea remained patient, reading to him, playing cards, reminding him that his worth was not measured by his physical capability. "You saved my life once," Wade said during his recovery. "Now you are doing it again. We are even then. You have saved me more times than I can count, in more ways than just pulling me from the snow." Wade's leg healed, though he walked with a slight limp afterward. He could no longer work the trap lines, which he ceded to Thomas, but he could still hunt close to home, could still chop wood and tend the garden and do the 1,000 small tasks that kept a household running. Thea developed a cough in their 50th year of marriage that worried everyone. The doctor from Hawthorne rode out to examine her and prescribed rest and warmth, saying her lungs had weakened. For weeks, Wade barely left her side, bringing her tea and medicine, reading to her, holding her hand. Slowly the cough faded and color returned to her cheeks. But it frightened them both, a reminder that time was finite. "I am not ready," Wade told her one night as she recovered. "I know we have been blessed with more years than most people get, but I am not ready to lose you." "You will not lose me for a long time yet," Thea promised. I am too stubborn to go anywhere. Their 50th anniversary was a grand celebration. Ellen organized it, bringing family and friends from far and wide. The cabin and its surrounding area were transformed, tables set up for a feast, lanterns hung from trees, a small band hired to play music. Wade and Thea sat at the center of it all, surrounded by children and grandchildren, by friends old and new, by a community that had watched their love story unfold over 5 decades. During the celebration, Ellen stood and called for everyone's attention. She raised her glass and spoke. 50 years ago, my mother nearly died in a snowstorm. My father found her and saved her life. It would be easy to say that moment of rescue was the beginning of their story, but I think it was more than that. It was 2 people who were lost finding their way home to each other. My father had isolated himself after the war, convinced he did not need anyone. My mother was traveling west to start a new life, uncertain what she would find. That snowstorm brought them together, but it was their choice to stay together, to build something beautiful despite obstacles, that created the family and life we celebrate today. To Wade and Thea Keller, proof that sometimes the worst circumstances lead to the best outcomes. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Wade looked at Thea, saw tears streaming down her face, and felt his own eyes fill. How had he gotten so lucky? What had he done to deserve this woman, this family, this life? I love you, he said, knowing she could not hear him over the celebration, but hoping she would understand anyway. She smiled and squeezed his hand. I love you too. They lived several more years in their cabin, surrounded by family, watching grandchildren grow and great-grandchildren arrive. Wade passed first, in his sleep at age 78, his heart simply stopping after a full day working around the property. Thea found him in the morning, still and peaceful, gone to whatever came next. The grief nearly destroyed her. For weeks, she barely ate or spoke, moving through each day mechanically. Ellen moved into the cabin to care for her mother, worried she would lose both parents in quick succession. But gradually, Thea found her footing again. She began eating, talking, engaging with her family. The grief did not leave, but she learned to carry it. He gave me 53 years, Thea told Ellen one evening. 53 years I would not have had if he had not found me in that snowstorm, if he had not been exactly where he needed to be at exactly the right moment. How can I be angry that I did not get more? We had more than most people ever dream of. Thea lived 2 more years, remaining in the cabin Wade had built, surrounded by memories and love. Her children and grandchildren visited regularly, bringing news and laughter and life. She told them stories about Wade, about their early days together, about the adventures they had shared. She wanted them to remember, to understand what their grandfather had been, what their love had created. On a spring morning, Thea passed away in her sleep, much as Wade had. Ellen found her in the bed they had shared for more than 5 decades. A peaceful expression on her face, Wade's picture clutched in her hands. The family gathered to mourn and celebrate, remembering both Wade and Thea, the love story that had begun in a snowstorm and endured until death finally reunited them. They buried Thea next to Wade on a hill overlooking their cabin, the mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. Ellen spoke at the service, her voice steady despite her tears. My parents taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day. They chose each other through hardship and joy, through sickness and health, through 53 years of marriage. They built a family, a legacy, a love that will continue through all of us who are here today. The cabin they shared will remain in our family, a testament to what they created together. And every winter, when the snow falls, I will remember the storm that brought them together and be grateful for the life that emerged from that chance meeting. Thomas and his family took over the main cabin, while Ellen kept the addition as a retreat when she visited from town. The property remained in the family, passed down through generations, each adding to its story. But it would always be known as Wade and Thea's place, the home of a love that had overcome odds and endured decades. Years later, great-grandchildren would play in the rooms where Wade and Thea had raised their family. They would hear stories about the Snowstorm rescue, about the teacher and the mountain man, about love that transformed two solitary people into a family. The stories would grow and change with each telling, but the heart remained the same. Two people finding each other against all odds and choosing to stay together through everything life offered. The cabin stood solid and strong, smoke still rising from its chimney in winter, garden still blooming in summer, a monument to what Wade and Thea had built. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when snow fell softly over the Montana mountains, residents would swear they could feel something in the air, some lingering warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. It was love, still present, still powerful, still reminding everyone who passed through that the greatest adventures begin when we open our hearts to possibility. The legacy Wade and Thea created extended beyond their immediate family. Ellen's students, taught with the same passion Thea had brought to her own classroom, went on to become teachers themselves, spreading education throughout Montana. Thomas's children and grandchildren became stewards of the land, conservation-minded ranchers and guides who protected the wilderness Wade had loved. Great-grandchildren scattered across the country, carrying pieces of Wade and Thea's story with them, telling their own children about the ancestors who had fallen in love in a snowstorm. On anniversaries of Wade finding Thea, the family would gather at the cabin regardless of weather. They would share a meal, tell stories, remember the two people who had started it all. Younger generations would ask questions about what Wade and Thea had been like, hungry for details that would make their ancestors more real. He was quiet, Thomas would say. Not shy, just careful with words. But when he spoke, people listened because you knew he meant what he said. She was fierce, Ellen would add. Kind but fierce. She would not tolerate injustice or cruelty. When she believed in something, she fought for it. They loved each other so completely, Sarah, Thomas's wife, would say. You could see it in how they looked at each other, even after decades together. They never lost that spark. The stories would continue late into the evening, firelight casting shadows on cabin walls that had witnessed so much life, so much love. And at the end of each gathering, someone would raise a glass and offer the traditional toast Ellen had created years ago. To Wade and Thea, may we all love as deeply and as well. The cabin, the land, the family, the stories, all of it was testament to one simple truth. Sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, and the willingness to accept it can change everything. Wade had saved Thea's life that December day, but she had saved his too, pulling him from the isolation he had wrapped around himself like armor. Together, they had created something that outlasted them both, a legacy of love that would echo through generations. And somewhere, perhaps, Wade and Thea existed still, together in whatever comes after this life, still holding hands, still grateful for that snowstorm that had brought them together, still in love after all time. The story that began with a whispered thank you had grown into something vast and beautiful, proving that the smallest moments can create the biggest changes, and that love, when given freely and maintained carefully, can indeed last forever.